Coming up today on Locked On at Texas Tech, the Red Raiders have won 4 straight and are squarely on an NCAA tournament bubble. A bubble? Yes, a bubble. With the top 25 Horned Frogs coming to town. The stakes are high!
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right.
Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to see you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for making us your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts each day. He's the only Chris Level. I'm Casey Cowan, and today's episode brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book and the official sports book of Locked On. Make every moment more and visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Chris, great to be back with you as always, and looking ahead to a weekend that is as big as any in West Texas in some recent memory, certainly from a regular season perspective. You got one of the bigger ball games on tap from United Supermarkets Arena than you've had in some time. I think you and I and just about every other Red Raider fan weren't even sure we would get to this point with this game really meaning anything other than, playing for pride and whatnot. But obviously you've put together here a path for yourself to potentially be an NCAA tournament consideration. It is a must-have, obviously, to win on your home floor after 2 straight on the road. And as we touched on yesterday, and you and I have talked about a little bit this week off the air, man, the magnitude of this game within the context of Mark Adams as a head coach in general, boy, it is looming large. Makes it a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're in this league and you can string some wins together, you create yourself some opportunities, and that's what that's what tomorrow is. And Cowan, I think we've had a few days to process kind of here, seeing where Tech settles in the bubble discussion, and you know what's left on your schedule. I really think that you can make a great argument. In fact, that's what I'm going to do here in telling you this is the second biggest regular season game in Mark Adams' coaching career. Granted, it's a short tenure. He's only been the coach for a season and a half or a season and 3/4 of a season. We're almost at the end of this one. I don't think there's any other game, though, that has this much at stake. The only other game I can come up with, this isn't obvious, is the Texas game at home last year. There wasn't a lot on the line in that one last year. However, we all know what was on the line, okay? I mean,
there wasn't a lot on the line, but there was a lot on the line.
It meant nothing, and it meant everything.
That's exactly right.
And there was 5,000 students out there in the rec fields and keg stands, and it's just absolute chaos. There was more energy in any building I've ever been in, regardless of event, and I think that is saying a mouthful because being in the Final Four, been to a variety of different sporting events and things like that. That was just wild. But because let's look at it this way: there's not been many games to where there is a tangible. Like the result is going to make you or close to break you here. You haven't really had that. You weren't – there was not really any point last season as you were kind of matriculating your way through the conference race that you were like, okay, if you win this one, you win. If you lose this one, you're out. You're kind of hanging in there. You lost a few, and then you just – other teams just kind of, ran away with it, the Jayhawks namely. But this one, to me – you're playing TCU at home. It's a quad 1 opportunity. Okay, they're really good. They've been beat up in recent weeks because they've been missing the Big 12 preseason player of the year, Mike Miles, and Eddie Lampkin, some of that. But I think we look at avenues and a path to the NCAA tournament. I don't really see a realistic one outside of a TCU win being included there. That's why I put so much importance on there. Could you go win at Kansas and then come back home and beat Oklahoma State? It's possible, absolutely. Do I think that is likely? That's going to be a tough one. Do
you want to make that your road?
Yeah.
By losing this one at home?
This is what I'm saying. And again, all hope is not lost if you lose to TCU. However, You know, and because you're talking about too, okay, I think you have to win 2 of your next 3 in the regular season. I think you have to get to 7, conference wins and be 7-11. And I think that is enough on your resume, and that the metrics are going to love that because these are quad 1 opportunities or borderline quad 2. And I think that because once you get in the conference tournament, you can sit there and say, hey, win a couple in Kansas City. Easier said than done. This has not been last year was the exception when you win a couple and then losing the championship game, because typically I've been up there a million times, man, and you always either lose the first one almost assuredly. I mean, it's just not been the Texas best.
The best run you've made, right? Didn't you get bounced first game of the Big 12 tournament, I think?
Yeah, that's right.
By West Virginia that year.
That was one of the best things that had happened. You'd won 9 in a row. Yeah, you'd won 9 in a row. And I remember sitting there in the hotel, because that's the one trip that you take where you don't leave immediately after the game. So in Kansas City, and I think the NCAA tournament, you always leave the day after you lose, just because they can't get NCAA coordinates travel, or the travel companies don't want to have a plane sitting there, on the runway. And if you win, they're like, okay, well, never mind. It just doesn't work like that. So you schedule it the day after. And Chris Beard said to his guys, you owe this fan base at least the Sweet 16, because that was embarrassing. I mean, he was just going after that team. And we sat around till you lose the night before. We sat around till 1 o'clock the next day. It was miserable. Everybody wanted to be home. Everybody was just miserable. You're just stuck in Kansas City, wallowing in this loss. But anyways, that as an aside. So, I think that you just don't know what's going to happen in the postseason. Sometimes it doesn't matter as much, or doesn't count as much of the neutral court portion of it. And again, it's just not been Texas Tech's best, place for success. Yeah. So I don't want to put everything on this TCU game, but yeah, it's a monster opportunity, and it's vital. It's important. I think it's the second biggest home game, the second biggest regular season game that you've played with Mark Adams as the head coach. I'd love for somebody to argue what would replace it. I think most would all agree that Texas game is tops. You could even argue that, as far as regular season games, the one in Austin last year.
The next Texas game, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But this one has tangible, results, success, just disaster, all over the based on the result. And again, all hope is not lost, and you certainly have not punched your ticket with a win. But I think that you set yourself up for one heck of an opportunity at 11 a.m. Tomorrow at the arena.
Well, I think we were all sitting here not too long ago saying you've got to get road wins first and foremost. And then you went and did it twice. I don't think any of us were sitting here thinking, okay, that road win needs to be in Lawrence, Kansas. I mean, we've all looked at that probably in the same kind of way between these two home contests with Texas Christian and Oklahoma State. So I would imagine we're all kind of in the same zone as far as the way that we are valuing these games. And I think for all the reasons you described there, you're on the money. And yeah, it may only be those 2 Texas games that would be ahead of this one, if not just one Texas game ahead of this one. But I don't even know if it has anything to do with it being Texas Christian, Chris, but you've got a top 25 opponent coming into your building that you need to beat in order to not put your back even more so against the wall by forcing your way into that path we talked about, where you really would need to get a road win in Lawrence, Kansas, and do some work at the Big 12 tournament. But there is a little added spice, I suppose, with this being an in-state rival as well. And I don't know about you, man, but it's like a lifetime ago when we played these guys. Hell, I was just a boy then, I think. I don't remember what year it was whenever we played these guys. Seems like a totally different season, totally different team. But let's take a trip back to that first meeting, Chris, because it was as frustrating. You notice that I'm saying this a lot whenever I say, hey, let's look back at the last meeting. We pulled our hair out in this one too. This was a conference opener. This was New Year's Eve. This was in front of a quaint 5,800 people in Fort Worth, Texas. And the Red Raiders, in a lot of ways, kind of confounded me that day as a basketball fan, Chris, as to how they were in this game when they were doing some of the things that they were doing. Like, you might remember, 23 turnovers on the day for Texas Tech. You obviously were still limited from a health standpoint Fardaws Aimaq was far off in the future. You were led that day in scoring by Pop Isaacs and Davion Harmon, the only two Red Raiders in double figures. You lose the game 67-61. You have an 11-point halftime lead. So it was one of those that just made you go, And little did we know there'd be a lot more of those on the other side of that made you go, What are your recollections from that day of Fort Worth, Chris? But first, today's episode brought to you by America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel. And now's the perfect time to download FanDuel because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. So just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app right now. It's safe, secure, super easy to use, and you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores, three-pointers, whatever you got. If basketball is your thing, college hoops on and popping, midway point of the NBA season now in the rear view, and we're looking ahead to March Madness just around the corner. So get in with FanDuel today. Download it right now and get hooked up as a new customer with the no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with that good old same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 and bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/Locked On. That's FanDuel.com/Locked On to learn more and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. What are your recollections from that day of Fort Worth, Chris?
Yeah, that was it was a partisan tech crowd, if anything, that day. That was the day that the TCU football team was about to, I guess, end up beating Michigan out in Phoenix, and so there was not a lot of TCU flavor in the stands. So there's a lot of Texas Tech fans, and you were very much still trying to figure out who you were. You had obviously had the issues in Maui, and lost a couple there, but this was the beginning of conference play, and you come out like just white hot, like you mentioned, on fire. You're up 9, and again, so we set the scene here. There was no Fardaws here. He was a couple of 2.5 weeks away from when he would debut. And the other thing to remember there, he didn't play just terribly. However, up until that point, Daniel Baccio had been really, really good. Okay. And this was the beginning of Baccio's kind of issues. Now we're going back 2 months ago here, but he wasn't, he probably shouldn't have played. I think he was getting sick before the game. He got sick at halftime. He had dropped some weight. It wasn't good, but he kind of he begged to play and asked in, and they let him. And he played 30 minutes in this game, and he didn't score much, but he had 9 rebounds. And here's the thing that I think people have probably forgotten. He had 5 blocked shots in that game. But yeah, the storyline was the turnovers. You turn it over 23 times, and you still have some of those issues. You could just rewind it back to the first 5 minutes in Norman, which is just a few days ago. So still have some of those turnover issues. But this was another example, because you mentioned the 11-point halftime lead. Man, you're up 10 with 10 minutes to go. Yeah. Okay, I went and looked it up. 10:36 left. You're up 10, and then you end up getting outscored by 16 points in the second half, 41-24. Actually, that would be 17. Math. It's a Friday. Shoot me.
It's early.
Yeah, that's right. 41-24, 17 points. Subtraction, addition. But this was just an example of a young team. Don't know how to win. Don't know how to close these games. But you've learned from that. I think you're better off for it. And you got the full TCU experience too. Yeah. This was Mike Miles was there, Eddie Lampkin was there, Damian Ball was there. I mean, they had everybody available. And Mike Miles, I think, went for 23 on you. Pop Isaacs did his thing and all that. But no, this was, I think TCU in some level was kind of bored at that point in the season. Mike Miles had missed some time, but I think they were kind of trying to figure some things out as well. And they would get really hot after, because keep in mind, TCU went into Lawrence, Kansas. Nobody wins there hardly. They went into Lawrence, Kansas and won by like 20 plus. That's how good TCU is capable of being. Yeah. They were one bucket away or one bad call away from being right there where the Red Raiders were last year in the Sweet 16. the call didn't go their way. Arizona moves on, and it was right after the Red Raiders had beaten Notre Dame. I mean, that game was.
Man, I forgot all about that. Yeah,
that was in San Diego.
Wild.
Yeah, I mean, it's so they were right there on the cusp of being a Sweet 16 team last year, and everybody's back. So.
I was thinking, like, where did Texas Tech lose this game in game one? And I'm curious what comes to mind when you think about that question. But may I offer up the aforementioned 23 turnovers? But in addition to that, 9 for 18 at the free throw line, Chris. I remember some of those chances at the charity stripe. And I had kind of forgotten how late into that second half, like you were just pointing out, around 10 minutes, you still had a double-digit lead. And think about some of those free throws going down then and what you could do. But you want to talk about pull your hair out. I can't hardly ever stomach missed free throws, and you were doing it often that day in Fort Worth.
Well, here's the other scary thing about that game is that, TCU, they only made 2 threes in that game, so it's not like they just lit you up from deep and yet they still won. The other, I think if you get any sort of typical game from Kevin O'Banner, I think he had some foul trouble early on in that one, and he just never got back into the game. It took him, off of his rhythm and just all those things. He only had 6 points, 4 rebounds. I mean, it was just kind of which we've come to expect, and rightfully so, much, much more from him. But I think, with Fardaws being back now and O'Banner not feeling all of this pressure, and you've got, a healthy Pop Isaacs Isaacs and Harmon played really well in this game. But I think with Jalen Tyson playing much better, because Jalen Tyson, he was kind of ho-hum in that game as well. He only had 8 points, just kind of a guy or non-factor, if you will.
Well, Chris, let's turn specifically to the Red Raiders in meeting number 2, because you're mentioning some of the names here that have led us to, have that feeling we've talked about of, man, you're projecting now for a different team than you were just a couple of weeks ago when talking about what they could be capable of. And it's easy to think from game 1 against Texas Christian to now, like, yeah, you've got a whole new player, and Fardaws Aimaq literally was not involved then, is involved now, and has had 2 straight double-doubles. I think it's easy to then also think about Pop Isaacs, even though he played in that game, recently returning from injury, and you're like, all right, well, there's another player added to the mix, and this is what has made the difference. I think it's very easy to think those things and probably accurate to think those things, but in my opinion, maybe you're missing the biggest quote-unquote new player, and that's the guy you just mentioned, Jalen Tyson. I mean, he's kind of an entirely new factor or level of factor or impact at this point in the season compared to where he was early on in the season in general or early on in Big 12 play. And I don't want to put too much pressure on the guy to have to go for 27 all the time, but you kind of enter a new stratosphere of scoring expectation when you do that. And so not only Aimaq, not only Pop, but really Jalen Tyson, in my mind, the guy that's kind of changing the fortunes of the Red Raiders offensively and overall. And Chris, I don't know what to attribute it to other than just progress within a season, because I don't know there's like something he's found, or I don't know, maybe you can fill in a gap there. I just almost feel like we're seeing the maturation and progression of a guy who was fairly early on in his college career still when he got back, and is playing in the toughest conference in the country. I don't know what else to attribute it to other than just some of that day-to-day grind, I guess, that now we're seeing show up.
Yeah, I think he's matured some. I think he has a ways to go there to be kind of what he ultimately wants to be if he wants to play basketball past college and everything. And that, he's still he's an emotional guy. Sometimes that works for him. Sometimes that works against him. He's one of those guys, though, that when he gets it going, his emotions, carry him forward. When it doesn't go well at the start, I think his emotions sometimes take him out,
Gotcha.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But what you've seen in the last 2 games specifically, because averaging 22.5 points over the last 2 games, I think that his confidence is grown, and he did not, to his credit, in Oklahoma. Hey, he was as much a part of the turnover problem at the start of the game as anybody.
Yeah.
And yet he kind of. He didn't let that derail him. He kind of kept hanging in there, and then the shot, he hits one shot. The next thing you know, he's having a dunk contest at the end of the game, and he's up 18, and you're running off the court with a road win. So I think I think that is just a sign of who he is a little bit, and that, you know, right now it's a confident young player, because people forget he's a freshman too. Yeah, he played briefly in Austin in the first semester a year ago. Okay, very little, sat out last semester. He's essentially a freshman. This is the first time he's gone through the Big 12 conference. I think as he's had these rematches with these schools, he's been better for it, able to handle it, understand what he's getting into. They all are, really. And what's fascinating is the only team that swept you, okay, the only team that has swept you is Kansas, okay? That's the – well, excuse me, hold on, Baylor. Sorry, you're playing Kansas next week. Baylor is the only one that swept you. You have a chance to split with TCU, split with Kansas, and split with Oklahoma State. So that's where – you know, so if you got the first time, you're kind of getting them on the second round, because, you know, so it negates. Unfortunately, you love some sweeps, but unfortunately, that's not the way it worked out. But West Virginia didn't sweep you. You negated their home win by getting one on the road, and same with Oklahoma. So I think it's just interesting as these guys are starting to grow and learn through the experiences of January, and they're much better for it in late February here.
Aside from Tyson, the others we obviously mentioned, guys like Aimaq, guys like Pop. I mean, whenever it comes to Big Maple, you got two double-doubles in a variety of ways over the last two consecutive games. So I don't know if I'm sitting here thinking, boy, he's really feeling it, or he's just like working to manufacture these double-doubles, because obviously 2 games ago he was, 2 for 11 and 10 for 10 at the free throw line. So it was kind of strange as far as how the points came. I don't know what we've seen still, or to what extent we've seen the true impact of Fardaws Aimaq, Chris, but I don't really feel like we've seen the bucket just emptied yet, right? So I'm kind of curious what's left there in that bucket for Aimaq, as we've got a few left in the regular season.
He is the biggest, I think, change in the last 2 to 3 weeks for Texas Tech. And not just because he's there and available, but because you have this other outlet, if you will. You have another outlet to rebound for you, to score for you, to facilitate for you, to help lead, to clog the paint and protect the rim a bit. I just think and that's why I always talk about margin for error. I think there were so many things that needed to go right for you whenever he wasn't playing, or Bacho wasn't playing. Yeah, you got to have, this guy's got to do this guy's got to do this, and now he's one more element that you add to this deal. That now, like O'Banner, he doesn't have to play perfect. He doesn't have to produce like he did. He did not in Morgantown. It was not his best game. You survived it. And that's what I think Fardaws does. But I think his play. Now, this is a game though that's going to be interesting. Is specifically to him. Now, this is a game, though, that's going to be interesting. It's specifically to him. We talked about, West Virginia wants to grind it. Oklahoma wants to grind it, like in the half court. They want to slow it down. TCU, this is a team that wants to get out and run. That's going to be their style. They want to get it into a track meet. They're really good in transition. I think that you're probably okay with that in your building, because you're really good in transition typically. Later on in the season, and you've got the guys that can get up and down the floor like Harmon and all that. However, what does that do to Fardaws? That is not necessarily his game. I wonder how again, who imposes what style on the game? How is it actually played versus what teams are wanting to do? And then how does Fardaws fit into that? He can get up and down the floor, but again, he's not the guy finishing the break. He's not the guy, this is more of a half court type guy. This is where he's getting a lot of these rebounds and points is in the half court settings with putbacks when the game slows down. So just the game within the game there. And he's going to have a big to beat on all game long in Eddie Lampkin. And Eddie Lampkin has got this big, vibrant personality and talks a lot, and has lost, I think, 70 pounds. I heard the other day since he got on campus, but he's a good player. He's bouncy, but he's probably 275, 6'11". So whenever he's in there, I mean, that'll be who Fardaws is matched up with. But I just wonder, as the game is played, how Fardaws fits into it if it gets into a really fast-paced track meet that gets into the 70s or 80s.
Yeah, okay. Eddie Lampkin's the guy that's got like the coral reef on his head. I remember.
Yes.
I thought he had the funky haircut. I don't know, Chris, if when you talk about such capability in transition for Texas Christian, really gives me some concerns about where Texas Tech will be defensively. What have you seen from them defensively over the last couple of games? Now on the road, obviously they had, arguably, but I think their best defensive night of the year against the University of Texas last time they were in their building. What have you seen on the road on the defensive end of the floor, and what does that transition capability mean as far as the challenge for Tech to really be a good defensive team tomorrow?
Well, I tell you, I'll answer your question this way. The best thing for transition defense is to hit shots. When you hit shots, you don't have to worry about it. And that's honestly what Texas Tech in the last couple of games specifically, as you asked it, they've shot the ball so well, they've really limited some of those opportunities. I will say that you looked up in Norman and you had given up 6 or 7 turnovers just right out of the gate, first 4 or 5 minutes. The points off of turnovers are something that Oklahoma really couldn't take advantage of. That number stayed at points off of turnovers stayed at really 10 after the initial spurt the rest of the game. And you turned it over, 16, 17 times. Mm-hmm. So I thought they did a good job of getting back, protecting the rim. Fardaws does this. So, again, I think that it's just part of all the game within the game and maturing and understanding that there is definitely a sense of urgency with this team. Yeah, they're having fun. This has been a fun run or fun last couple of weeks, and winning does that to you. It makes you feel better and all that. But I think they also have kind of kept that, and they've got to keep it. They can't lose that edge. You can't have any more, hey, man, my bad, coach. No more my bads, man. Like, those are over with. You used all those up, man. The my bad allowance is spent. So, yeah.
We went from timeout currency yesterday to my bad allowance today, baby.
That's right. That's
Chris,
right.
I mean, how many more times can you win with so little production from your reserves? I was just looking last time against Texas Christian. You had 15 points off of the bench. That seems like 100 points off of the bench. Yeah. If you could get 15 off the bench tomorrow, I'd feel really good about your chances to win. But you haven't got much of that here recently. What did you get the other day? I think only 5 points from Washington and Fisher. Not that they weren't a big 5, and I think all came at the free throw line, if I'm not mistaken. But either way, you've got to get more. You kind of been skating by, I guess, if you can call it that. Been up and down. You've had some decent bench days, and the Pop Isaac's presence as a reserve was really interesting a couple of games ago, but I just don't know how long, whether it's regular season or we're granted the gift of talking about a postseason. I don't know how long you can really keep a run going if you can't consistently get a little bit more heavy lifting from your reserves.
Yeah, and typically at home, I think your role players, they usually play better. The Kerwin Waltons, DeMorion Williams. I mean, like poor DeMorion Williams the other day, I don't know what happened. I'm sure, I don't know if you saw this play, but I really think it hurt his stock in the coach's eyes. Kevin O'Banner gets a rebound, throws an outlet pass to DeMorion Williams, and he's just not looking, not ready for it, not anticipating it, nothing. And it was one of your turnovers, and I don't think he played anymore after that. He immediately came out and was like, because again, it's like, we can't have this right now. I need you as focused as you've ever been as a basketball player, and somebody just threw you an open pass in a wide open half court, and the whole Oklahoma team is back there, and we just threw it out of bounds because you're just simply not looking for the ball. Like, you can't space out like that. So. And to this point, I haven't really seen the pressure get to anybody just yet.
Yeah.
I don't know when that's coming. I don't know if tomorrow is that day. I don't know, O'Banner won't feel it. I mean, he'll be smooth and all that, as he always is. But I mean, some of these other guys that haven't really been through this, or if they start to read how much you're on the bubble and what a TCU win would do, and a big crowd and all those things at a Saturday home venue and all that. I mean, you just wonder if you start to feel a little bit. But some of these role guys, they've got to step up, man. I mean, you're going to need it from Lamar. I thought Fisher was great the other night. You touched on it after the game, Casey, in that not a ton of minutes, but they are extremely productive when he's in there. Maybe we get more of those.
Yeah, he's been impactful when he's been on the floor. And, something that feels good, I think, as a Tech fan, you just talking about how do you respond to growing pressure, and it'll continue to grow if you continue to win, obviously. You mentioned O'Banner, but I think about some of those frontline guys, O'Banner, Harmon, Papa Isaacs, with all due respect. I mean, it's a big credit to him as a freshman, but I put him in this group. It ain't no thing but a chicken wing to those three guys when the lights are on and the lights are bright, right? And we're talking about two old heads, and then we're just talking about Papa Isaacs. I don't even know what to make of Papa Isaacs being so confident in these big moments, but those three guys, and maybe I should put Aimaq there, I don't know, but I know those three guys, I don't think they're going to blink in the face of pressure. I think, Isaacs just seems like one of those guys that these are the games he's here for. Like he may be one of those throughout the course of his basketball career that gets bored here or there when the lights aren't the brightest. But I feel pretty good about those guys' ability to handle the growing pressure, and hopefully as team leaders, that'll also extend elsewhere to the rest of the team. Chris, I think something that could change, if any recent history is an indication, could change and change in a big way for the better as compared to the first matchup. Just to wrap it up here before we get out, I don't know if you recall, but 44-22 was the disadvantage points in the paint for Texas Tech, 44-22. There have been some of these games where statistically, that's one of the areas that really makes my head snap because we've been so good as far as points in the paint in some of these recent wins. And maybe that's one of those things that would really shift from the first meeting to the second meeting. Not that Texas Christian is any less capable now than they were then, but Texas Tech certainly seems a lot more capable near the rim now than they were then. Maybe that's something that changes that could give us a little hope as we head into Saturday.
Yeah, and I think this coaching staff has done a really good job of when they have a few days to scout and really put these kids in a good position, especially after they've already played somebody, of really correcting. And I mean, I just go back to look at the rebounding situation versus West Virginia. Yep. I mean, they were complete opposites. And I thought, the latter one was the better situation for you because you learned from it. I think against Oklahoma, I think that there was some similar adjustments made, and I think some of those things certainly paid off in your second matchup with them, and I would expect nothing less than that versus TCU because you're right. That, again, those are the things that you look at. You start looking at a box score after it was over, like, okay, how did we get here? Layup drill, man,
Yeah.
And Bacho had the 5 blocks, but there's just not enough, communication or rim protection or understanding, ball screen coverages and different things like that in the paint. And that's what, because nearly 50 points, I guarantee you Mark Adams has that circled with a Sharpie and has pointed that out repeatedly because that goes against everything that they stand for from a defensive standpoint.
Hey, I know we got to get out of here, but Daniel Bacho, I forgot you were there. Is there any reason to ask about Daniel Bacho? Where is the guy? What's going on with the boy?
He's close. Okay. I think he's really close. I don't think it's anything serious or anything. I think what's weird is that you've won a lot without him here lately, and I don't think that's like a negative toward Daniel Bacho. I think that you just kind of gotten hot as Fardaws has played really, really well because I just think people are going to forget in time. Especially when we start having these conversations here in 2 or 3 weeks about, okay, who's back? Who do you want back? How's this thing what's it going to look like going forward? And next year as they build a roster and build a team together for next year here pretty quick. Bacho was phenomenal in like November and most of December. I mean, he was kid plays hard. I mean, so I still have these illusions maybe, of grandeur. I don't know. I hope that they become reality of, I'd like to see some mixture of that, Daniel Bacho mixed in with this version of Fardaws. Because I think at this point, if you can kind of coexist and you can kind of or have a 1-2 punch there, man, you're cooking with gas at that point. And I don't know if we'll get it or not, but I sure am hoping. But I do think he's going to be back here pretty quick.
Somebody might even say you're cooking with peanut oil at that point, Chris, which is what you would say if you lived even further out in the country than the guy that was just cooking with gas. So
I fried a turkey with peanut oil before. It's damn good.
And didn't burn down the house?
I did not.
The turkey can taste like crap, but not burning down the house, that's an achievement in and of itself. Worry about the turkey taste the next time around because I've seen some near misses also around the old turkey fryer. you kind of forget, because it has been going so well, what Daniel Baccio was at a different point in time, and I sure as hell want him back in the mix. I would love to see that opportunity if you do get it, and maybe we will, especially if you give yourself a chance to play some more basketball on the other side of the regular season. All right, man, looking forward to the game, Chris. It's been a great week. I've enjoyed talking a lot of Red Raider hoops here with you as we are basking in the glow of hope still very much remaining alive. It's going to be wild, woolly, and western out here on the other side of the 100th meridian tomorrow, where it's really going down as Texas Christian comes to town. Break out the ghillie suits, whatever else you're rocking tomorrow at the USA to get you in the mood. Chris, enjoy the call, man. You'll see it up close there, and hopefully we've got another win to talk about on Monday.
Yeah, man, monster opportunity. Hope to see everybody out at the arena. We'll talk to you, I guess, after it's over with, and keep hope alive, everybody.
It's been treating us well so far to do just that, so keep hope alive. For Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Thanks again for watching Locked On Texas Tech and making it your first listen on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Hope you'll also check out Locked On College Basketball, your one-stop college hoops shop, for your second listen right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. That is Locked On College Basketball for your second listen. For Chris, I'm Casey. Have a great weekend. We'll see you at the arena and be back to visit with you on Monday on Locked On Texas Tech.